Hi ladies, welcome back to my channel. So I want to talk to you about mother wounds and how they're holding you back. I've spoken a few times about mother wounds on this channel, but I think it's good to revisit this topic because number one, it's a very complex, kind of deeply entrenched topic. There are multiple layers to any form of trauma, but especially mother wounds because the relationship between mothers and their daughters can oftentimes be complex. And they can be complex because it's expected that the relationship between a mother and a daughter is supposed to be close and one of the strongest bonds out of like a relationship pairing. It's supposed to be like the highest form of a best friend relationship. But oftentimes we see situations where that's not the case. And sometimes there are many women, especially in the Black community, but not only, but particularly in the Black community, a lot of Black women struggle with mother wounds and don't realize it because they don't realize that their mother has been a stumbling block in many ways, whether that is being her first bully, whether that is in her kind of being too busy to take care of your emotional needs because she was busy trying to earn a living on her own, whether it was her being emotionally stunted. Some mothers kind of dealt with their own trauma and issues, and they thought that their children would be the ones to help them not only manage their emotions and be an emotional escape for them, but in a lot of times, sometimes being like a spiritual spouse to them. The saying husband, son, like some mothers have this unhealthy emotional attachment to their sons to the point that like they treat their sons like their husbands, the husbands that they wish they had. But this also extends to their daughters as well, where they may not show like affection the way that they would with their sons, but they rely on their daughters to help them financially or emotionally in a way that a husband was supposed to step in for her. And of course, like there's this psychological, emotional connection that you have with your mother where, you know, you regard your mother as the one who gave you life and your first caregiver. And so there's always that kind of reverence and respect of no one can speak negatively about your mother, which can then, of course, blind you from toxic relationship patterns that you've been subject to your entire life. And some of you are experiencing an uphill battle because you're carrying your mother wounds. And again, it shows up in many ways. One of the ways is your mother expecting emotional support from you. So having an unhealthy codependent relationship that is often one-sided, where you're expected to give back by being there for any request as a thanks for being brought into the world, even though no human being on this planet was asked to be brought into the world. But oftentimes this is weaponized. Especially in the Black community, there's this saying that is often thrown around, like, I brought you into this world and I can take you out, which is to say, like, you know, I am the one who can determine your fate and you should thank me for bringing you here and I get to control your fate, which is not true. Another wound is financial support. So being expected to support your mom financially. I'm mentioning mom in this situation, not just only because of what I mentioned at the beginning of this video, but also because, let's face it, a lot of Black women were raised in single parent households, and these single parent households are often led by women, right? And so while what I'm saying can apply to any woman, regardless of her race, the fact of the matter is the overwhelming majority of Black women were raised in a single parent household, that being a part of the 64% of Black children that were raised with a single mother. And so to some degree, a good chunk of y'all are going to experience some form of this because we also know that the poverty rate is high, which is why I often tell women who do not have children especially to be very careful in trying to avoid single parenthood because of the challenges that the children experience, but also you experience in trying to simply just survive. Memberships are now live on this channel. Click the link in the description box to sign up to receive access to exclusive content and perks. And obviously this doesn't apply to every single Black woman. I want to make that very clear. There are some of us who are raised with amazing mothers, mothers who were cheerleaders, mothers who were advocates, mothers who truly did their ultimate best in their own way to make sure that their kids received the very best, whether was them working their butts off to make sure that they had a stable home to live in, a safe community to live in, food on the table, making sure that their kids were able to experience traveling. And so shout out to those mothers who truly did their absolute best in their own capacity with whatever they had to make sure that their children lived a healthy life. But I would be remiss if I ignore the fact that a good chunk of Black women struggle with mother wounds. And this is evident because Black women in particular have very unique challenges, if you will, that shows up in the way that they interact with the world, interact with those around them. And another way that these wounds show up is through being a secondary or tertiary parent. Again, goes back to the single parenthood, oftentimes as the oldest daughter. So even if you're not even the oldest child, if you are the oldest female child in the home, it is kind of bestowed upon you to be the secondary or tertiary caretaker of your siblings, especially younger siblings or your male siblings. And so you're kind of expected to, help cook, clean, pick up kids from school, babysit. And it's kind of like your duty because, mom needs help. And it's even more daunting for those who are living in a two-parent household, but your father is emotionally absent. And so you have to not only play the tertiary parent to your siblings, but you again have to play that pseudo spouse to your mother because her partner is not showing up the way that he's supposed to. And a lot of times that shows up in her trauma dumping and complaining about her partner while choosing to remain in that relationship, choosing not to leave, choosing not to have boundaries, and you're left with the emotional pieces. These wounds also often show up as constantly having your feelings invalidated. This is especially true for those who are raised in religious households, where it's kind of like, you kind of have to turn the other cheek, show compassion to people, be forgiving. But a lot of times it shows up as this kind of sacrificial lamb or even being a scapegoat where it's like you're kind of always in the wrong. You're kind of always misinterpreting other people's feelings, other people's emotions. You just don't get it. You need to be more compassionate instead of saying, okay, actually, this person's behavior towards you is inappropriate. You have every right to feel the way that you do. And now you should do what it takes to protect yourself emotionally and mentally so that you don't have to bear the burden of guilt of that other person's actions towards you. And sometimes that shows up as like your mother saying, see it from that other person's point of view. Whereas like in comparison to some mothers who are always like the cheerleader and the advocate saying, you know what? That girl, she was mean to you because she's just jealous of you. Those girls excluded you because they're just jealous. You're smarter than them and they feel intimidated. Like that mother always trying to validate and instill confidence versus a mother that constantly makes you second guess yourself because it's always your feelings are often met with skepticism. And while all of these are an issue in and of itself, it's more problematic because a lot of Black women carry this mentality into every social interaction, as I mentioned before, where many Black women end up being the workhorse or mother figure in every interaction that they have, whether it's at school, work, church, whatever, while being hesitant to advocate for themselves due to mentally ingrained beliefs that you're being selfish for asking for more, or sometimes for some women, asking for more is simply just you actually asking for the bare minimum. Like your standards and your boundaries are so non-existent that you asking for more is actually like what the average society would consider bare minimum. In a lot of cases, that's respect. In a lot of cases, that's learning how to say no when you feel like something is contrary to your personal beliefs, values, psychological safety, whatever. And for others, it's you negotiating for things that will improve your quality of life and kind of lift you up from, barely getting by, constantly being in survival mode to being in a place where now you no longer have to worry about things financially. You're in a place of comfort and ease because you chose to advocate for more. And this in general is a difference between the haves and the have-not. For example, people from like upper middle class, like wealthy families, they always instill in their children the importance of being entitled, or what the world deems as entitled. They always ask questions. They will always negotiate. They'll never accept the first offer, for example, for like a job offer. If they're in school, they're asking questions. They're always advocating for their grades, extra marks, whatever, extra help. Whereas those who are raised in like middle class, so like lower, like working class, whatever, lower socioeconomic statuses, they're always taught like, you should just be happy that you're here, especially if you're raised in an immigrant family. You should just be happy to be here, be happy that you're included, don't make any noise, don't disrupt anything for fear of being kicked out or excluded from certain places. And of course, that's going to cause trauma because then it's like, well, how come my peers get to have the very best and their parents are constantly telling them to reach literally for the stars? But then you, a first, second, third generation immigrant, are telling me to keep my head down and yes, massa my way through things. When it's like you came here to this country for better opportunities, like I should be able to access everything that is available to me, if I'm equally working hard and sometimes harder. And so this conditioning of servitude, instead of being made to feel worthy simply for existing, has led to chronic unworthiness, which is why a lot of Black women settle for less. They will settle for less in their relationships. Just having any type of man that is able-bodied is good enough for some Black women, or any type of man that has a job is good enough, or at least he doesn't have more than one or two baby mamas. Like, that's good enough for them. When it's like, no, like I deserve to have access to a functional, sustainable living arrangement, relationship, working relationship, whatever it is, like my counterparts. But I've even heard of some peers where, like, for example, this one girl that I went to school with, she was recounting a conversation that she had with her mother where she was saying, like, I want to only date a man who makes six figures because I don't want to be in an impoverished relationship. And if I decide to have children one day, like, I don't want to be raising my kids in poverty. And the mom was like, oh, well, she was Caribbean, like the mom was Jamaican. And she was like, oh, your chest is too high, meaning like your standards are too high, or like your chest is puffed out, like too haughty to think that you are deserving of someone who makes six figures. And my friend was like, oh, well, Asian mothers always tell their daughters, for example, to only date men who make good money. And the mom's response was like, oh, well, that's those women, that's not you. And it's like, how lowly could you think of your daughter to tell her that that's those women? You're pretty much indirectly saying that those women may be worthy and able to snag a man who makes six figures, but you're not, which is heartbreaking to hear, which is why a lot of Black women, a lot of successful Black women at that, you see that with a lot of actresses, they end up settling for bums. Look at Megan Good with Jonathan Majors. Look at Whitney Houston with Bobby Brown. And so having this limited mindset, this mindset of lack, often shows up as waiting to be acknowledged or handed things rather than going for it, which is why the employment rate, for example, for Black women is 7.2%. compared to 4.2%, which is the national rate. Many Black women probably foresaw layoffs happening. They probably saw management jumping ship. They probably heard whisperings and rumors, and they kind of obviously made them feel unsettled, but they're like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and see my fate. Or if there were no layoffs, they complained about not being appreciated or feeling fulfilled at work, whether that's being underpaid and overworked, but stayed put until they were let go for fear of shaking the table. And we all know of that one employee, especially Black female employee, that will constantly complain about how much she dislikes her job, how unhappy she is, but she still shows up faithfully. Or she'll complain and be like, I want more money, I want this, I want that. And then when you ask her, okay, well, what are you doing to get more money? What courses are you taking? What certifications are you getting? Oh, well, she always has an excuse. Nothing. She just waits for other people to say, so-and-so, you've worked so hard, we're going to give you a promotion. And maybe that model worked 20, 30, 50 years ago, but in this day and age when the market is super oversaturated, and super competitive, promotions will only be given to those who go for it. And sometimes that means leaving your company that you've worked for years to go somewhere else where they will appreciate you and will be willing to pay you what you're worth. Gone are the days where, people can stay at a company for years until retirement, start their career, and then retire at the same company because corporations are now looking out for themselves, looking to cut costs. They're offshoring jobs, cutting back hours, replacing it with AI, even if the AI doesn't work, just so that they don't have to pay employees. Start doing the work to heal from your mother's trauma dumping, because for a lot of you, that's where this unworthiness and operating at a limited mindset comes from. You are not your mother's second chance at life, and just as how your mother would remind you that she's not one of your little friends growing up, you are not her peer and therefore not responsible for helping her get through her problems, especially if she won't do the work to heal or won't or didn't extend the same grace to you. And that doesn't mean that you need to have animosity and that you despise your mother. You can still very much love your mother and still have boundaries. And I know in a lot of cultures, having boundaries, a lot of parents see that as a form of disrespect and that you don't love and appreciate them. But this is a new generation where relationships don't have to be unhealthy in order for children to show their parents that they love and respect them. Heal yourself from that succubus spirit and enforce boundaries. Sometimes that may look like saying, I don't have the capacity to help you with this. Or, I am no longer going to help you with your finances. You got to figure it out. That's not my responsibility. Sometimes that may mean going to therapy. That may mean moving out and living your own life. I promise you, you will really get a better understanding of who you ought to be when you move out and figure out life for yourself. When you get out of the bubble of your community, whether that's your church community, your toxic family community, where everyone kind of has the same groupthink mentality, and get around people with a different outlook on life, especially those who may align with the type of lifestyle that you're trying to live. And I'm not even talking about physical things either. Sometimes it may be something as simple as having common hobbies or being interested in a certain type of comedy. Something as simple as that can really freshen up your outlook on life. Anyway, these are my thoughts on the topic. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.